Welcome back to Fast Market here on the TD Ameritrade Network. Let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment, and that's going to be Landon Swan, co-founder at Likefolio. Welcome back to the show, Landon.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, so we're talking the consumer, talking Walgreens Boots Alliance here. The stock's struggled pretty heartily this year, down about 15%. So what kind of data are you guys seeing out of Likefolio? Because it seems like, these drugstores were doing really well for a good period of time out of the pandemic, but they've run into a lot of trouble lately.
They have. You know what? I mean, we like to look at Walgreens and CVS kind of in tandem. We like to look at those together because they're so closely related. And I can tell you that between the two, Walgreens is clearly the weaker. It's interesting because on their last earnings report, both companies did well. They both beat on revenue and earnings. But on Walgreens, they talked about having sharply lower COVID tests and COVID vaccinations and tests. The stock went up because they reaffirmed their guidance, whereas with CVS, they lowered their guidance and the stock went down. But you can actually see on the just total social mentions here, we're seeing a little bit weakness out of both, but weaker from Walgreens at -8% versus -4%. And you can actually see it in the web traffic data as well. Both of them are down a little bit. CVS is down about 9% on a year-over-year basis, whereas Walgreens down about 25% on a year-over-year basis. So web visits both favor CVS, but neither one of them are doing really well. When we look at that last quarter, they talked about wanting to focus on their health unit, their primary care, in-home services, things like that. They talked about having higher wages in the pharmacy, higher costs, especially with the Summit Health acquisition. And I think a lot of it has to do with just less people going to get vaccinated, less people going to get tested for COVID, and that's like a forced visit to the store. And if you're going for something like that, you're going to pick up some other items. Whereas maybe if you're not going for that, then you can save off the items that you're picking up and get them at Target or Walmart or order them from Amazon or something like that. So just these extra reasons for people to go have been taken away. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of the drop off with these stocks.
That's why they put the pharmacy in the back of the store, Landon, to get you to walk through the store to get to it. But here's the thing. Both these companies whose stocks, have gotten beaten up lately, and actually you said that CVS is stronger, but it's actually down more than Walgreens Boots Alliance. But you're right. It sounds like all the metrics favor CVS if there was a competition here. But trying to transition your business from a pharmacy retailer into primary care, that's a big transition. And both these companies are taking it on. It just looks like it's a longer runway than they thought. Walgreens Boots Alliance healthcare service, that part of their business is not profitable yet, and it's weighing on the rest of this. And so there's other things going on. Their dividend, which we don't really discuss, but it's 6%. It's more money than they make, Landon. So something's got to happen there. Do you guys see any light at the end of the tunnel with them trying to get in the primary care business?
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that they're both trying to do that, right?
Yeah.
And before we get into that, you talk about dividends. That's one of the things that dividend investors look at is how long you can keep and raise your dividend over many years. But if you get to the point where it's more than you're making, you have to cut it, and that's going to be very bad for investors. That's like a big signal for dividend investors to get out if you cut the dividend. So they know that they're going to try to hold as long as they can, but that's going to be significant if and when they cut. But yeah, again, it's not a coincidence they're both getting into this. You can get, the pharmacy play has so much competition now because now when you go pick up groceries, you can get your pharmacy filled, right? Just about every grocery store has it. So there's a lot of potential competition here that makes it so they've got to get into other areas. So the fact that they're both doing this, and yeah, they're both seeing much higher costs, is weighing on their earnings significantly. But I think it's the long-term play that they both have to do. That's why they're doing it. But for the short term, it's not appealing as an investor. So, between the two, again, Walgreens is doing worse. CVS doesn't report for a while. Walgreens does report. That we've got them right now at a negative 22. So that's just barely in the bearish column. 20 is kind of the cutoff. So we would be comfortable taking a bearish position on them. We're not betting the farm, but we just don't like what we've seen, especially, they're both down. The sector's bad, but then when you have two direct comparisons like that and you've got the worst one coming ahead of the other one, so it makes me fairly comfortable going into this earnings report with a bearish position.
Yeah, and near a multi-year lows at this price, at this point, as far as price goes. But Landon, have you guys seen any data on this slippage that's become a big term word out there for investors and anybody that follows the retail sector? Where you go into a Walgreens or a CVS now, and deodorant's locked up, and razors and everything is basically locked up, and they're closing stores in major cities, Chicago, San Francisco, all the hot spots for theft inside. Have you guys seen any data on that?
Yeah, we've seen the sentiment turn fairly negative because those kind of things get headlines. Even if it's not happening where you live, it does get a lot of headlines. So we have to kind of take that with a grain of salt because we don't know the actual impact because everybody's talking about it on social media. But it's definitely a reality. And, we could go for a couple hours on the politics of it, but we'll save that for another time. But yeah, you get to the point where it's difficult to shop in a store and you have to go ask the clerk, hey, I'd like to buy some deodorant. Can you unlock this, please? You're not going back to that store. It's a convenience store, basically. And if it's inconvenient, then it's not what it's supposed to be. So yeah, I think that's a real problem that they've got to address. And that's, it's either figuring it out with better security or more likely just moving out of those places and closing stores. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that plays out, but it's absolutely weighing on them for sure.
Yeah, definitely them and CVS on that. All right, great stuff. Great data as always, Landon. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Take care.
All right, that's Landon.